Hey family, this is day 87 of our Reading Through the Bible Together in a Year series. Today we're in the second book of Samuel, covering chapters 4 through 7. Now, all of 1 Samuel has to do with Samuel being the last judge of Israel, and then Saul becoming the first human king, and then Saul being kind of okay, but then super prideful and just wanting control and wanting to keep his kingship and being threatened, and therefore God takes away his kingdom from him and anoints David. Samuel goes to the house of Jesse and anoints David as the next king. Now, David kills Goliath and starts gaining clout, right? He gains a good reputation and everybody loves him. Saul loves him. Jonathan, Saul's son, loves him. Saul gives Michal, his daughter, to David as a wife, and the people of Israel are starting to love David too. But then David's reputation becomes a threat to Saul. You know how that goes. Saul tries to kill David. David runs away. David has opportunities to kill Saul, but he doesn't do it because he doesn't want to reach out against Yahweh's anointed. But at the end of the first book of Samuel, Saul gets killed in battle in a suicidal way. He asks his armor bearer to kill him because they're losing the battle. The armor bearer won't do it, so Saul falls on his own sword. And so where we're at now is that David has mourned for Saul and Jonathan. He's mourned for Saul, even though Saul was kind of an enemy. But Saul's son, Jonathan, and a couple other sons have died. And Saul has one more son, Ishbosheth, who is still alive, who has kind of been placed as king over the northern tribes. And David has been placed as king over Judah. So we're going to see how that plays out a little bit today. When Shaul's son heard that Avner was dead in Hebron, his hands became feeble and all the Israelites were troubled. Shaul's son had two men who were captains of raiding bands. The name of one was Ba'anah and the name of the other Rechav, the sons of Rimmon the Be'erotite of the children of Benjamin, for Be'erot also is considered a part of Benjamin. And the Be'erotites fled to Gataim and have lived as foreigners there until today. Now Jonathan, Shaul's son, had a son who was lame in his feet. He was 5 years old when the news came about Shaul and Jonathan out of Yisrael, and his nurse picked him up and fled. As she hurried to flee, he fell and became lame. His name was Mephibosheth. The sons of Rimmon the Be'erotite, Rechav and Ba'anah, went out and came at about the heat of the day to the house of Ishbosheth, as he took his rest at noon. They came there into the middle of the house as though they would have fetched wheat, and they struck him in the body. And Rechav and Ba'anah his brother escaped. Now when they came into the house as he lay on his bed in his bedroom, they struck him, killed him, beheaded him, and took his head, and went by the way of the Arava all night. They brought the head of Ishbosheth to David to Hebron, and said to the king, Behold, the head of Ishbosheth, the son of Shaul, your enemy, who sought your life. Yahweh has avenged my lord the king today of Shaul and of his offspring. David answered Rechav and Ba'anah his brother, the sons of Rimmon the Be'erotite, and said to them, As Yahweh lives, who has redeemed my soul out of all adversity, when someone told me, Behold, Shaul is dead, thinking that he brought good news, I seized him and killed him in Ziklag, which was the reward I gave him for his news. How much more, when wicked men have slain a righteous person in his own house on his bed, should I not now require his blood from your hand, and rid the earth of you? David commanded his young men, and they killed them, cut off their hands and their feet, and hanged them up beside the pool in Hebron. But they took the head of Ishbosheth and buried it in Avner's grave in Hebron. Then all the tribes of Israel came to David at Hebron and spoke, saying, Behold, we are your bone and your flesh. In times past, when Shaul was king over us, it was you who led Israel out and in. Yahweh said to you, You will be shepherd of my people Israel. You will be prince over Israel. So all the elders of Israel came to the king to Hebron, and King David made a covenant with them in Hebron before Yahweh. And they anointed David king over Israel. David was 30 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 40 years. In Hebron he reigned over Yehudah 7 years and 6 months. And in Jerusalem he reigned 33 years over all Israel and Yehudah. The king and his men went to Jerusalem against the Jebusites, the inhabitants of the land, who spoke to David, saying, The blind and the lame will keep you out of here, thinking, David can't come in here. Nevertheless, David took the stronghold of Zion. This is David's city. David said on that day, Whoever strikes the Jebusites, let him go up to the watercourse and strike those lame and blind who are hated by David's soul. Therefore they say, The blind and the lame can't come into the house. David lived in the stronghold and called it David's city. David built around from Millo and inward. David grew greater and greater, for Yahweh, the God of armies, was with him. Hiram, king of Tyre, sent messengers to David with cedar trees, carpenters and masons, and they built David a house. David perceived that Yahweh had established him king over Israel, and that he had exalted his kingdom for his people, Israel's sake. David took more concubines and wives for himself out of Jerusalem after he had come from Hebron, and more sons and daughters were born to David. These are the names of those who were born to him in Jerusalem: Shammua, Shovav, Natan, Shlomo, Yivchar, Elishua, Nepheg, Yaphia, Elishama, Eliadah, and Eliphelet. When the Philistines heard that they had anointed David king over Israel, all the Philistines went up to seek David, but David heard about it and went down to the stronghold. Now the Philistines had come and spread themselves in the valley of Rephaim. David inquired of Yahweh, saying, "Shall I go up against the Philistines? Will you deliver them into my hand?" Yahweh said to David, "Go up, for I will certainly deliver the Philistines into your hand." David came to Baal Perazim, and David struck them there. Then he said, "Yahweh has broken my enemies before me, like the breach of waters." Therefore he called the name of that place Baal Perazim. They left their images there, and David and his men took them away. The Philistines came up yet again and spread themselves in the valley of Rephaim. When David inquired of Yahweh, he said, "You shall not go up. Circle around behind them and attack them in front of the mulberry tree. When you hear the sound of marching in the tops of the mulberry trees, then stir yourselves up, for then Yahweh has gone out before you to strike the army of the Philistines." David did so as Yahweh commanded him, and struck the Philistines all the way from Geba to Getzer. David again gathered together all the chosen men of Israel, 30,000. David arose and went with all the people who were with him from Baale Yehuda to bring up from there God's ark, which is called by the name, even the name of Yahweh of armies, who sits above the cherubim. They set God's ark on a new cart and brought it out of Avinadab's house that was on the hill, and Uzzah and Achio, the sons of Avinadab, drove the new cart. They brought it out of Avinadab's house, which was in the hill, with God's ark, and Achio went before the ark. David and all the house of Israel played before Yahweh with all kinds of instruments made of cypress wood, with harps, with stringed instruments, with tambourines, with castanets, and with cymbals. When they came to the threshing floor of Nachon, Uzzah reached for God's ark and took hold of it, for the cattle stumbled. Yahweh's anger burned against Uzzah, and God struck him there for his error, and he died there by God's ark. David was displeased because Yahweh had broken out against Uzzah, and he called the place Perez Uzzah to this day. David was afraid of Yahweh that day, and he said, "How could Yahweh's ark come to me?" So David would not move Yahweh's ark to be with him in David's city, but David carried it aside into Oved-Edom, the Gittite's house. Yahweh's ark remained in Oved-Edom, the Gittite's house, 3 months. And Yahweh blessed Oved-Edom and all his house. King David was told, "Yahweh has blessed the house of Oved-Edom and all that belongs to him, because of God's ark." So David went and brought up God's ark from the house of Oved-Edom into David's city with joy. When those who bore Yahweh's ark had gone 6 paces, he sacrificed an ox and a fattened calf. David danced before Yahweh with all his might, and David was clothed in a linen ephod. So David and all the house of Israel brought up Yahweh's ark with shouting and with the sound of the trumpet. As Yahweh's ark came into David's city, Michal, the daughter of Shaul, looked out through the window and saw King David leaping and dancing before Yahweh, and she despised him in her heart. They brought in Yahweh's ark and set it in its place in the middle of the tent that David had pitched for it, and David offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before Yahweh. When David had finished offering the burnt offering and the peace offerings, he blessed the people in the name of Yahweh of armies. He gave to all the people, even among the whole multitude of Israel, both to men and women, to everyone a portion of bread, dates, and raisins. So all the people departed, each to his own house. Then David returned to bless his household. Michal, the daughter of Shaul, came out to meet David and said, "How glorious the king of Israel was today, who uncovered himself today in the eyes of his servants' maids, as one of the vain fellows shamelessly uncovers himself." David said to Michal, "It was before Yahweh, who chose me above your father, and above all his house, to appoint me prince over the people of Yahweh, over Israel. Therefore I will celebrate before Yahweh. I will be yet more undignified than this, and will be worthless in my own sight." but the maids of whom you have spoken will honor me." Michal, the daughter of Shaul, had no child to the day of her death. When the king lived in his house, and Yahweh had given him rest from all his enemies all around, the king said to Nathan the prophet, "See now, I dwell in a house of cedar, but God's ark dwells within curtains." Nathan said to the king, "Go, do all that is in your heart, for Yahweh is with you." That same night Yahweh's words came to Nathan, saying, "Go and tell my servant David. Yahweh says, should you build me a house for me to dwell in? For I have not lived in a house since the day that I brought the children of Israel up out of Egypt, even to this day, but have moved around in a tent and in a tabernacle. In all places in which I have walked with all the children of Israel, did I say a word to anyone from the tribes of Israel, whom I commanded to be a shepherd of my people Israel, saying, Why have you not built me a house of cedar? Now therefore tell my servant David this, Yahweh of armies says, I took you from the sheep pen, from following the sheep, to be prince over my people, over Israel. I have been with you wherever you went, and have cut off all your enemies from before you. I will make you a great name, like the name of the great ones who are in the earth. I will appoint a place for my people Israel, and will plant them, that they may dwell in their own place, and be moved no more. The children of wickedness will not afflict them any more, as at the first, and as from the day that I commanded judges to be over my people Israel. I will cause you to rest from all your enemies. Moreover, Yahweh tells you that Yahweh will make you a house. When your days are fulfilled and you sleep with your fathers, I will set up for your offspring after you, who will proceed out of your body, and I will establish his kingdom. He will build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be his father, and he will be my son. If he commits iniquity, I will chasten him with the rod of men and with the stripes of the children of men. But my loving kindness will not depart from him, as I took it from Shaul, whom I put away before you. Your house and your kingdom will be made sure forever before you. Your throne will be established forever. Nathan spoke to David all these words, and according to all this vision. Then David the king went in and sat before Yahweh, and he said, Who am I, Lord Yahweh, and what is my house, that you have brought me this far? This was yet a small thing in your eyes, Lord Yahweh, but you have spoken also of your servant's house for a great while to come. And this among men, Lord Yahweh. What more can David say to you? For you know your servant, Lord Yahweh, for your word's sake, and according to your own heart, you have worked all this greatness, to make your servant know it. Therefore you are great, Yahweh God, for there is no one like you. Neither is there any God beside you, according to all that we have heard with our ears. What one nation in the earth is like your people, even like Israel, whom God went to redeem to himself for a people, and to make himself a name, and to do great things for you, and awesome things for your land, before your people, whom you redeemed to yourself out of Egypt, from the nations and their gods. You established for yourself your people Israel to be your people forever, and you, Yahweh, became their God. Now, Yahweh God, the word that you have spoken concerning your servant, and concerning his house, confirm it forever, and do as you have spoken. Let your name be magnified forever, saying, Yahweh of armies is God over Israel, and the house of your servant David will be established before you. For you, Yahweh of armies, the God of Israel, have revealed to your servant, saying, I will build you a house. Therefore your servant has found in his heart to pray this prayer to you. Now, O Lord Yahweh, you are God, and your words are truth, and you have promised this good thing to your servant. Now, therefore, let it please you to bless the house of your servant, that it may continue forever before you. For you, Lord Yahweh, have spoken it. Let the house of your servant be blessed forever with your blessing. Yeah, so finally Ishbosheth is out of the way. He was killed, and David's not happy about it, and he has the guys who killed Ishbosheth killed, and so now David is the only ruler left, and so he's appointed as king, and he's bringing the Ark of the Covenant back into, he's trying to take it back to Jerusalem. There's a little scuffle with Uzzah, or however you want to say that. One thing to keep in mind about the story of Uzzah, and just the fact that Uzzah reached and grabbed the ark even though he wasn't supposed to, and he killed him. Remember what I said before about, all these specific situations where God kills somebody directly for being close to the presence or doing exactly what they're not supposed to be doing. It's not just that Uzzah touched the ark when he wasn't supposed to. That's there, that's present. But another thing to consider is that they have the Ark of the Covenant in a cart being pulled by oxen. And that's not how they're supposed to be carrying the ark. The ark is supposed to be carried on its Asherah poles? No, Asherah poles? Acadian wood, whatever the type of wood is, it has poles that the priests are supposed to carry it on foot. So for one, it's being carried the wrong way, and then when the cattle stumble and Uzzah tries to stable the ark with his hand, it kills him. So there's a few different things going on there, but not super important, or at least thing that I want to pay attention to the most, because we like to see that David, as he decides to take the Ark of the Covenant into Jerusalem, every 6 paces he sacrifices a bull, like absolute total devotion and dedication to Yahweh and giving it all. And then when he gets in there, he's worshiping Yahweh. He's dancing hard, right? We love that. He's dancing. And his wife, Michal, is despising him because he's dancing half naked. And she's like, you're making a fool of yourself. And he says, I'm praising Yahweh. I will be more undignified than this, right? Like, how dare you? How dare you tell me that my pure praise of Yahweh is embarrassing? I just love that story. And David's handing out food, bread and cakes and sweets and treats and all these things. Like he's feeding his family, he's feeding his nations, he's feeding his kingdom in worship to Yahweh. It's just like this great scene of a royal feast, a royal banquet type stuff, right? You see a little Jesus echoes in there. But then we have this next story about David wanting to build God a house. And I love God's response. God tells Nathan the prophet to go to David and say, have I ever asked for a house? Have I ever said that I wanted a permanent dwelling? It's like, no, my original plan was I want this tabernacle because I want to go with you. I am a God who goes with the people. I'm not bound to a geographic location. And God wants that, likes that, and has been happy with that. And so he is relenting and saying, hey, I will let your descendant build me a house. But you're not going to build a house. And this is where, some people take this as like heavy messianic language, right? There will be a descendant of yours and he will have a kingdom that's established forever. That's fine. Totally take it in the Jesus direction. I love it. I'm all for finding things that point forward in the Old Testament. Just remember, good messianic prophecy, good messianic pointing, you have to take all of the details into account. You have to consider the fact that even though Jesus fulfills that passage or fulfills that foretelling, that may not be what the original author had in mind, that what they were writing, right? Because in that passage, it talks about when your descendant, when he causes iniquity or when he does something bad, like I'll punish him like a son, right? And we know from this side that Jesus didn't do anything bad, right? So he didn't get punished like a son. I mean, you can maybe think about the fact that he took on other people's sin and therefore, experienced the God's wrath thing. But just remember, as we continue on through the Old Testament, there's a lot of stuff that totally sounds like a prophecy, messianic future telling. And some of it, it's so easy to link it, and that's okay. Just make sure you're always paying attention to what is the author originally saying. And remember, you can't ever just take a verse out of context, right? Just because one verse talking about somebody sounds like it's pointing to Jesus, take all of those verses around it, because if other details don't line up with Jesus' life, maybe that verse doesn't either. So there's a lot to be said about that. But yeah, that's an important thing to know. But I really do just like that at the end, David is blessing Yahweh and saying, God, this is wonderful that you've promised this establishment, this kingdom, and just fulfill your promise like I know you will. You're a good God. May my house be blessed because of you. It's a nice David and God moment, and we're going to see it start to fall downhill, I think, tomorrow, if not the next day. But we just love these moments of God treating his David person right and promising him good things, and the establishment of God's kingdom where there will be rest and blessings for the nations. We love all that stuff. So good things, good stuff to think about. I hope you do continue to think about it as you have a wonderful day.